Shalom Aleichem Rabotai, Good Mod, Modim Simcha. Today is the 5th day of the Omer. This is Rabbi Kovacs. We are continuing our learning in the Mishnah Yomi, in the 7th parak of Kilayim. Yesterday we begun the 7th parak HaMavrich, and Mavrich was training one tendril of a grapevine underground and then popping it back up in a new location. And at the new location it would grow new roots, and then you could later separate them and have two separate grape plants from one original vine. And in the second Mishnah, we mentioned that a grapevine that dried out, it's Asur of Mikadeshet, meaning you can't plant other species within the radius, whether that's 6 tefachim for one grape or 4 amos for a karam, for a vineyard, of a dried out vine, because it looks like a real vine. But if you did, it's Mikadeshet. It doesn't make it Asur as Kilayim, where you have to burn everything, the Isur deraisa. The mayor added even cotton is like this, and then Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok said that even planting on top of an underground vine is like this, where it's Asur to do something, but it doesn't make it Asur behana as the full deraisa prohibition of Kilayim, and you won't have to burn everything. Obviously you'd have to remove it and take it out, but it could be still edible, not what we call Asur behana, that has to be burned and cannot be enjoyed, such as chametz b'Pesach. A Jew cannot have any enjoyment from it, so you can't feed it to your animals or sell it to people either. So now picking up at Mishnah Gimel, continuing this theme. Eilu osrin v'lo mekadshin. These are things that are oser. You cannot plant them together, but it doesn't make kilayim deraisa, where you're going to have to burn everything and get no benefit from it. And here's the list. It's kind of a review, a chazara. Motor charbon hakerem. So the leftover space of a clearing in a vineyard. Now we had this in the first Mishnah in the 4th parak. We had the karachas hakerem. This is the same issue, where you had, if you had 16 amot clearing in the middle of the vineyard, you could plant there, but you needed to have 4 amot buffer because there's still a kerem on both sides, all around it. And if you had leftover space in the middle, if you had 8 amot, according to Beit Hillel, you could plant something else. But what if you only had 7 amot in the middle? So if you only had 7 amot, well, you're not supposed to plant anything there, but if you did, it's not within the vineyard, because it's not within that 4 amot of avodat hakerem, of the workspace of the vineyard. Motar mechol hakerem, the leftovers of the border around the vineyard. This here too, if it was out, if there was a fence, and there was a 4 amma workspace gap, and then there was an additional 8 ammas between the workspace and the fence, you could plant something else. What if there's only 7 amot? So that's motor mechol hakerem. It's outside the vineyard or botai, but it doesn't look so chashuv. So they don't want you to plant something there. But if you did, it's not kilayim deraita. Motor piske aris, the leftover space of the break in an aris, in a trained vine. That was the 6th parak, the 6th Mishnah, where you had 11 vines in a row, and then the middle one, for instance, was dried up, died, ripped out. So then there was a space in the middle. Motor apifyarot, the leftover space in a trellis. Remember, that's the 3rd Mishnah in the 6th parak. You trained your vines over a trellis, and the trellis becomes bottle to the vines, so you can't plant anything else under it. But really, it's only fully aser as kilayim deraita under the vine itself. Under the trellis, even though the trellis is bottle to the vine, it's aser to plant something else there, but it doesn't make it aser behana, that it has to be burnt. Aval tachat gefen, but underneath a vine itself, that would be aser. We're going to see, and that's the 9th Mishnah in the 6th parak. If you have a vine stretching out through the air past your trellis or past your fence, and it keeps going past the 4 amos, so to plant anything under that is still aser, or a vine stretching from one tree to the other. Under the vine itself is aser. Avodat hagefen, and the workspace for one grape plant. So remember, under one plant is 6 tefachim, because it's not legally a vineyard. The arba amot shebakerem, and the 4 amot around a vineyard, the workspace of a vineyard. Re elu mitkadshot. These do make kilayim deraisa, and it's mekadesh in the bad sense. Pen to kadesh. If it grows in the state, you have to burn it in a fire because it's aser behana. Onto Mishnah Dalet, and we're going to see this one is a bit of a mind blower. Some versions of Mishnah combine Dalet and Hay. They list Dalet Hay, and then they list them both together. and we're going to find out why, God willing, in tomorrow's Mishnah. I'm going to try bli neder to post it this afternoon because it's Erev Yom Tov. But on to Dalet, and we'll see why this is so interesting. Hamsochech et gofno al gabet fuato shel havero. So a man who trained his vine, he moved his vine, he made it schach, like schach of the sukkah, but he put it over the grain of his neighbor's field. So apparently there's some sort of machlokas going on. He says, I'll show him, and I'll take a grapevine and stretch it over on top of his wheat. Hare ze kiddush. This makes Kilayim deraisa. V'chayev b'achriyuto. And the one who stretched his vine over there has to pay for the damages to the wheat that now has to be burnt because now he's put his vine over that guy's wheat. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon omrim, ein adam mikodesh davar shayno shelo. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon say a person cannot cause kilayim in property that's not his. So it's very interesting. The Bartan Nura says that he points out that every other Isser in the Torah, we do say Adam oser davar shayno shelo, or Adam mikodesh davar shayno shelo in this case. But for instance, if Reuven's making a cholent and he's left the lid off his cholent, and Shimon, his neighbor, hates the guy, God forbid, you're not allowed to hate another Jew unless he's like involved in avodah zarah. But he throws a stick of butter into the hot cholent. Now that's Asur deraisa. Now Reuven didn't want any butter. He didn't want any liquid, any cholov in his cholent. Obviously, he doesn't want that. He wants to eat the cholent for Shabbos or Yom Tov. But his neighbor threw a stick of butter into the cholent. It's Asur. There's nothing you can do about that. You can't say, well, I didn't want the butter there. That guy's my neighbor, and this is my cholent, and how could he Asur my cholent? No, the molecules of that cholent are Asur deraisa as basar b'cholov. Stick of butter in the cholent. There's nothing you can do or say about that. But Kilayim is a little bit different. Kilayim is a little weird because the argument is, the Bartan Nura points out, it's karmecha. Kilayim. It's your vineyard. It implies you have to own, that one person has to own the vines and the other plants involved. So it sort of implies that if one person would take vines into another person's property, maybe that doesn't count as Kilayim. It's karmecha. It's the possessive, your vineyard. And the other Mefarshim, there's actually 29 Mefarshim cited in the Sfaria on this one Mishnah, to give you a sense of there's a lot going on under the surface here. They point out that the Tosfos in the Gemara says that there's also a Sfara, a logical reason. We've seen in Kilayim it's different. We saw if seeds blew in the wind into your field, you don't have to go on crawling on the ground picking up every seed. You could wait until they sprout and then grab the hoe and rip them out, because you don't want them there. And since you don't want them there, it's not Asur right now. You can wait a few minutes and maybe wait a few days, and then because you're going to rip them out, it's like you've ripped them out already. We saw if you're going down the rows of your vineyard and you look ahead a few rows and say, oh, there's Kilayim up there. When I get there, I'm going to rip it out. Even if it added 1 200ths, which normally would be Asur as Kilayim, it's not a big deal because you're on the way there to rip it out. You don't want it there. So we see that the Isser deraisa of Kilayim is somewhat talui, dependent on your mindset, on your intention. So it's a very interesting observation that Kilayim, karmecha, and its dependent on mindset could be different from every other Isser in the Torah. And it makes it very interesting. However, the Bartan Nura and the Rambam Pascha and the Halacha here is not like Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, which again is a little odd because we often say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah because Mishnah Rabbi Yossi kavanaki. We say that Rabbi Yossi knows what he's talking about. But here there are other reasons, according to the Rambam and Bartan Nura, to say the halacha is not like him. The Tosfot Yom Tov says maybe not, don't speak so quickly, because we're going to see later on a lot of the other Mishnah in the Perek seem to assume, like Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yossi, that Kilayim is different, and that ein adam mikodesh davar shayno shelo dafka by Kilayim. But recall, by every other Isser in the Torah, if somebody else throws the butter into the cholent or pours the milk into the fleishigs, it's game over. So don't go doing that. Don't so have a happy and healthy Yom Tov and a Hag Sameach, and keep the butter out of the cholent. Shkoyach Rabotai.